The Sony 55mm 1.8 has been one lens that almost never leaves my bag. I bring it everywhere with me. On the street, for cityscapes, portraits, night photography, rainy shots, you name it. This lens can literally do it all. This lens is actually the lens that I've had the longest, so I've had all the time in the world to judge this lens and shoot with it in real life conditions. Size. Coming in at 281 grams, this lens is barely even noticeable whenever I bring it along with me in my bag. Couple that with how small this lens is, it really is effortless to bring everywhere. This means I don't have to worry about bringing the lens with me for shoots. I just throw it in my bag and I'm set. With my bigger lenses like the 16-35 GM, I think about the weight, the bulkiness of the lens, how it'll fit with the other gear in my bag. Then I gotta start playing Tetris and fitting everything in my bag. The easier I can make my life with smaller and lighter gear, the less it gets in the way of the actual photography process. Along with the effortlessness, the small size comes in handy in other aspects of photography, blending in more when it comes to street photography. I'm able to comfortably capture moments without having to worry too much about being confronted by people. Though does it still happen to me? Of course it does. What can you do? You can't help it. But I can definitely argue that it would happen to me more if I go out with, let's say, a 70-200. My favorite focal length, 55mm. Being a prime lens, this lens is not able to zoom in or out. That is all done with your feet and your movement. So if I were to say a focal length that I'm most comfortable with, it would definitely be the 50mm area. Just a word of caution, any lens can be used for any genre of photography. You can use whatever tool at your disposal to create what you want. Don't be boxed in into certain classifications for lenses. Like one of my favorite photographers, Professor Hines, says, when you're buying a lens and see a box, nowhere on the box will it say portrait lens, landscape lens, etc. With that being said, the reason why I love this focal length so much is for multiple reasons. To go more in depth with those reasons, I must explain. I love capturing details and being able to include the area I'm photographing into the photo. I think this adds a great deal of story. However, I don't like being too intrusive of people's space and would rather just not bother someone just to get a photo. Along with these thoughts, I like having tighter photos that are more close up to avoid having anything extra that might distract the viewer from the main subject of the photo. The 50mm focal length checks all these boxes for me. But on the other hand, if I'm able to comfortably get closer to a subject, such as, let's say, a portrait session, this lens allows me to do that as well. It isn't as tight as the 85mm, but at the same time, the 55mm still lets me able to exclude some certain elements of the environment that I might think would be distracting for the viewer. And if I do find myself needing to zoom in more, but physically can't, well then I can just crop in post. With the way I photograph, I often end up finding myself at a distance where the 55mm focal length is perfect for me to check all the boxes I mentioned earlier. Sharp AF. I don't know if it's just my copy or something, but I've heard similar comments from others who have used this lens. So I think I can safely say this. This lens is sharp, like really sharp. I'm not a pixel peeper by any means, but sometimes I'll be zoomed in at like 400% when doing some masking work, and I'll just think to myself like, damn, this is sharp as hell. Being a 1.8 lens. Being that this lens is f1.8, that means whenever I'm going out at night for some night photography, I'm able to gather more light, allowing me to lower my ISO to a certain extent for a cleaner image. Although with great lens, you can easily boost your ISO up higher than usual and still end up with a clean image. I love photographing at night, so having a fast lens is a necessity. Of course, an f1.4 or an f1.2 would be even better and ideal, but that comes up with a trade-off. A heavier setup, which I've discussed previously in this video, and a more expensive lens, which actually brings me to my next point. Well priced. Used, not new. I love buying lenses used. I think out of all the lenses I have, only 2 have been purchased new, and that's just because they were on sale for a good price. I almost always buy used, as you can save so much money that way. The 2 sites I always use are KEH and MPB. Again, not sponsored by them, I just really trust them in their service. More often than not, what they say on their website is actually an understatement of the actual quality of the lens. Their excellent rated lenses can easily be confused for something that's like new. This Sony 55mm 1.8 on KEH with an excellent plus rating is priced at $549. On MPB, with a like new condition rating, it is priced at $524. With tax, that's probably around $600. For a lens like this, at a price like that, I'd say that's a steal. When I first bought this lens used, I paid around $730, and even at that price, I thought it was a pretty good deal, especially since the retail price of this lens is $998. At the end of the day, we all have our favorite focal lengths and what we're comfortable shooting with. We all have that one lens we can look to where we know we can get something good regardless of where we're at. For me, that lens is the 55 1.8. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend you do for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Whatever the lens is, just go out there, shoot as much as you can. Until next time.